David stared at the massive viewport of Harmony Prime space station, watching ships from dozens of different worlds dock and undock in an endless dance of commerce and diplomacy. He never thought he'd be here, floating in the void between star systems, trying to help negotiate humanity's future with beings from another world. As a terraforming engineer, David was used to fixing broken things, broken atmosphere processors, failing water recyclers, damaged habitat domes, but broken diplomatic relations. That was way outside his comfort zone. The Zephyrians are getting impatient, Ambassador Roberts said, walking up beside him. The older man looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes from weeks of failed negotiations. They're talking about walking away from the whole deal. David turned away from the viewport. What's the main sticking point? Mining rights in the Kepler system. Both sides want it, and neither wants to share. The Zephyrians say it's been their territory for centuries. We say we discovered it first by human standards. Roberts rubbed his temples. It's like trying to negotiate with a brick wall, except the brick wall can read your thoughts. That was the thing about the Zephyrians. They weren't quite telepathic, but they could sense emotions and intentions in a way that made humans uncomfortable. David had met a few during the technical briefings, and it felt like they could see right through him. Why don't we just find another system? David asked. Space is big. There have to be other places to mine, because Kepler has the rare earth elements we need for our new colony ships, and the Zephyrians need the hydrogen compounds for their bioships. It's the perfect system for both of us, which makes it the worst possible thing to fight over. David nodded. He understood resource problems. You couldn't terraform a world without the right materials, and sometimes you had to make tough choices about where to get them. The conference room buzzed with tension when David walked in for the afternoon session. The human delegation sat on one side of the long table, while the Zephyrians occupied the other. The aliens looked almost human, except for their slightly pointed ears and the way their skin seemed to shimmer with different colors depending on their mood. Right now, most of them were showing pale blue, which David had learned meant frustration. At the head of the Zephyrian delegation sat Princess Lyrale. She was younger than David had expected, maybe in her late 20s by human standards. Though he knew Zephyrians lived much longer than humans, her skin showed a steady silver color, which meant she was thinking hard about something. We have been discussing this matter for 3 weeks, High Counselor Vex said, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Zephyrians seemed to have. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative solutions. Ambassador Roberts leaned forward. We're open to suggestions, but we're not giving up our claim to the system, nor are we, the princess said quietly. Her voice was softer than the counselor's, but somehow it carried more weight. However, there are precedents in Zephyrian history for resolving such disputes. David found himself paying attention in a way he hadn't during the previous sessions. There was something about the princess's tone that suggested she had an idea. What kind of precedents? Roberts asked. Princess Lyrale stood up, her skin shifting to a pale gold color. In ancient times, when two clans could not agree on territory, they would form a unity bond. Two representatives would join their bloodlines, creating a new family that belonged to both clans. The disputed territory would then belong to this new family, and both clans would benefit from its resources. The room went quiet. David could hear the hum of the station's life support systems in the silence. You're talking about marriage, Roberts said slowly. A diplomatic marriage, yes. It is an old custom, but it has legal standing in Zephyrian law. If a human and a Zephyrian were to bond, and if this bonded pair were to oversee the Kepler system, both species would have equal claim to its resources. David felt his heart skip a beat. He looked around the table at his fellow humans. Most of them looked shocked or confused. Ambassador Roberts was already shaking his head. That's impossible. The biological differences alone are not insurmountable. Princess Lyrale interrupted. We have studied human physiology. While we cannot produce offspring together, we can form emotional and legal bonds that would satisfy both our legal systems. High Counselor Vex's skin was showing deep purple now, which David had learned meant surprise. Apparently, the princess hadn't discussed this idea with her own people beforehand. Even if that were possible, Roberts said, who would volunteer for such a thing? This isn't the medieval ages. We can't just arrange marriages between strangers. David surprised himself by speaking up. I would. Everyone turned to look at him. He felt his face getting hot, but he continued. I mean, if it would prevent a war and help both our species, I'd consider it. Robert stared at him. David, you're an engineer, not a diplomat. You can't just… Why not? David stood up, his hands shaking slightly. Look, I've been listening to these negotiations for weeks. We're not getting anywhere. Both sides want the same thing, and neither side wants to back down. If there's a way to solve this that doesn't involve fighting, shouldn't we try it? Princess Lyrale was looking at him with interest, her skin shifting to a warm amber color. What is your background, Engineer David? I design terraforming systems. I've helped build colonies on 17 different worlds. I understand resource management and interspecies cooperation. He paused, then added, and I'm not married, or anything, so I wouldn't be leaving anyone behind. This is ridiculous, Roberts muttered. But David could see other members of the human delegation whispering among themselves. It is not ridiculous, Princess Lyrale said. It is practical. Engineer David understands the technical aspects of resource extraction and colony development. He would be able to oversee the Kepler system operations effectively. High Counselor Vex leaned toward the princess. Your Highness, this is highly irregular. Your father would need to approve such an arrangement. My father wants this alliance to succeed. She replied calmly. He has given me authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire. David felt like he was watching his life change in real time. A few hours ago, he'd been a background technical advisor. Now he was apparently volunteering to marry an alien princess to prevent an interstellar war. I would need to know more about what this would involve, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Of course, Princess Lyrale said, we would need to discuss the terms, the ceremony, the legal implications. But Engineer David, I must ask you directly, are you prepared to leave your world and your people to live among the Zephyrians? David thought about his small apartment on Earth, his job at the terraforming company, his handful of friends who were probably wondering why he hadn't answered their messages in weeks. Then he thought about the alternative. Two species go into war over a star system. Colonies destroyed, lives lost. If it means peace between our peoples, then yes, I'm prepared to do that. The princess's skin shifted to a bright gold color, which David had learned meant approval, or happiness. Then we have much to discuss. The next few hours passed in a blur of legal documents, cultural briefings, and medical consultations. David learned that Zephyrian marriage ceremonies involved complex rituals that honored both families and the life force of the universe. He learned that the princess had been trained in diplomacy since childhood and spoke 7 different languages. He learned that their marriage would be legally binding in both human and Zephyrian law, but that they would be expected to work together as partners, rather than as a traditional married couple. The ceremony will take place tomorrow, Princess Lyrale explained as they sat in a small conference room, going over the details. It will be broadcast to both our worlds as a symbol of the new alliance. Tomorrow? David felt his stomach drop. That's really fast. Time is important in diplomacy. She said gently, the longer we wait, the more opportunity there is for opposition to develop on both sides. She was right. David had already heard grumbling from some of the human delegation about selling out to the aliens. He could imagine what people back on Earth would say when they found out. Are you nervous? The princess asked. David looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with large eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge and experience. But more than that, she seemed kind and genuinely concerned about his feelings. Yeah, I'm nervous, he admitted. I don't know anything about being married, let alone being married to someone from another species. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing or break some important custom? Princess Lyrale smiled, and her skin showed a warm golden glow. Then we will figure it out together. That is what partnerships are for. The ceremony took place in the station's main amphitheater. with representatives from both species watching. David wore a formal human suit, while Princess Lyrale wore traditional Zephyrian robes that seemed to shift color with her emotions. The ritual itself was a strange mixture of human and Zephyrian customs. They exchanged vows in both languages, promising to work together for the good of both their peoples. They shared water from both the Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld, symbolizing the joining of their. David stood outside the door to the royal quarters, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone on the ship could hear it. The Zephyrian flagship was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft, living light, and the air carried a faint scent of something like jasmine mixed with ozone. He'd been married for exactly 4 hours now, and he still couldn't believe it had actually happened. The ceremony had gone better than expected, especially after he managed to fix that fountain malfunction. But now came the part he'd been dreading all day, the wedding night. What exactly did alien princesses expect from their new husbands? David had tried to research Zephyrian customs, but most of the information was either too technical or too vague to be helpful. All he knew was that Zephyrians formed emotional bonds differently than humans, and that physical compatibility wasn't impossible, just complicated. He took a deep breath and pressed the door control. The panel slid open with a soft whisper, revealing a room that took his breath away. The quarters were enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars outside. Soft furniture that seemed to be grown rather than built was arranged around the space, and pools of warm, glowing water bubbled quietly in alcoves along the walls. But what really caught his attention was Princess Lyrale standing in the center of the room, wearing full ceremonial armor that gleamed like silver in the starlight. David said, stopping in the doorway. Should I come back later? Are you expecting trouble? Princess Lyrale turned toward him, and David could see her skin shifting to a pale blue color beneath the armor. Trouble? No. David, this is traditional wedding night attire. Armor is traditional wedding night attire? David looked down at his own simple clothes, suddenly feeling very underdressed. For the trial of minds, yes. She gestured to a table that held what looked like complex technical equipment. Did no one explain this to you? David felt his stomach drop. Trial of what now? Princess Lyrale's skin shifted to a warmer gold color, and she began removing her armor piece by piece underneath. She wore a simple, comfortable-looking outfit that reminded David of work clothes. I apologize. I assumed your people would have briefed you. Among Zephyrians, the wedding night is not for physical intimacy. It is for mental bonding. Mental bonding? David sat down heavily on one of the strange, cushioned chairs. You mean like telepathy? Not exactly. Princess Lyrale finished removing her armor and sat across from him. We believe that true partnership comes from understanding how each other thinks. So on the wedding night, couples are given a complex problem to solve together. The way they work through it reveals their compatibility. David felt relief wash over him, followed immediately by nervousness. What kind of problem? This year's challenge involves a colony ship in distress. She activated the equipment on the table, and a holographic display appeared showing a massive vessel drifting in space. The ship carries 10,000 colonists. In suspended animation, their life support systems are failing, and they have perhaps 6 hours before the situation becomes critical. David leaned forward, his engineer's instincts kicking in. What's wrong with their systems? Multiple failures, power distribution problems, atmospheric recycling malfunctions, and the main computer core is damaged. Princess Lyrale waved her hand, and the display zoomed in to show different sections of the ship. The challenge is to design a solution using only the resources available on the ship. But this is just a simulation, right? David asked, though something in the princess's expression made him uncertain. No, she said quietly. This is the merchant vessel Hope's journey. They sent a distress signal 3 hours ago. The nearest rescue ship is 12 hours away. David stared at the display, his mind racing. You mean we're actually trying to save real people? Yes. The trial of minds is always based on real situations. It ensures that couples learn to work together under genuine pressure. Princess Liralay's skin showed a steady silver color. Are you ready to begin? David stood up and moved to the display. Tell me everything you know about their situation. For the next hour, they worked through the technical details. David quickly realized that Princess Liralay knew far more about spaceship systems than he'd expected. She understood power flows, life support mechanics, and computer systems in ways that complemented his own knowledge perfectly. The main problem is power distribution, David said, pointing to a section of the ship's schematic. They're trying to run emergency systems on a grid that was designed for normal operations. It's like trying to run a marathon while breathing through a straw. But if we shut down non-essential systems, we risk losing the colonists in suspended animation. Princess Liralay added, their pods require constant power to maintain proper life support. What if we don't shut down the pods, but change how? They're powered. David began sketching modifications on the display. Look, if we reroute power through the secondary conduits and use the emergency batteries as buffers, that could work, Princess Liralay said, her skin brightening to a warm amber. But we would need to reprogram the main computer to handle the new power distribution pattern. Can we do that remotely? Not with their main computer damaged. But she paused, studying the display. What if we use the bio-neural processors and the suspended animation pods themselves? Each pod has a small computer system. If we network them together, David felt excitement building. We could create a distributed computer system using the pods as nodes. The colonists' own life support systems would become the computer that saves them. Exactly. Princess Liralay's skin was now showing bright gold. But we would need to be very careful about the programming. One mistake could affect the life support for thousands of people. They worked through the night, taking turns at the controls while the other watched for potential problems. David was amazed by how naturally they fell into a rhythm. When he got to focus on technical details, Princess Liralay would remind him about the human element. When she worried about the complexity of the solution, he would break it down into manageable steps. You know, David said during a brief break, I was terrified about tonight. Princess Liralay looked up from the computer system she was programming. Terrified? Why? I thought we were going to have to figure out how to be, romantic, and I had no idea how that would work between our species. She smiled, and David realized it was the first completely relaxed expression he'd seen from her. Romance is important, but it comes from understanding and respect. Physical attraction is nice, but it fades. Mental compatibility lasts forever. Is that why Zephyrians live so long? Because you choose partners based on how well you think together. Partly, yes. We believe that minds that work well together help each other grow stronger over time. She returned to her programming, but continued talking. What did you think romance was about? David felt his face getting warm. I don't know. Candles and flowers and stuff like that. I guess there can be candles and flowers too, Princess Liralay said with a laugh. But first, we must build a foundation of trust and understanding. Tonight, we are learning if we can depend on each other when lives are at stake. As the hours passed, David found himself enjoying the work more than he had anything in months. Princess Liralay asked good questions, caught mistakes he might have missed, and had ideas that pushed him to think in new ways. More than that, she seemed to genuinely value his opinion and expertise. I think we have a solution, she said as the first hints of dawn began to show through the ship's windows. David looked at their final design, a complex but elegant system that would use the colonists' own life support pods as a distributed computer network, managing power distribution and life support functions across the entire ship. It was unlike anything either of their species had built before, but it should work. Ready to transmit, he asked. Princess Liralay nodded, and together they sent their solution to the Hope's journey. Then they waited, watching the display as the distant ship's crew implemented their design, power distribution stabilizing. Came the report from the ship's captain. Life support systems responding normally. Computer network this is incredible. It's like the ship is thinking with 10,000 minds instead of one. David and Princess Liralay looked at each other and smiled. They had done it. 10,000 lives saved by combining human engineering with Zephyrian biotechnology. So, David said as they finally turned off the displays, how do we do on the trial of minds? Princess Liralay's skin showed a soft, warm gold color. I think we passed with excellent marks. You are creative, methodical, and you care deeply about people you have never met. Those are good qualities in a partner. And you're brilliant, patient, and you help me think in ways I never would have on my own. David paused, then added, I think this marriage might actually work. I think so too, she said softly, though we should probably get some rest. Tomorrow we begin the real work of building a partnership. As they settled into separate sleeping alcoves, David realized that he was no longer afraid of the strange new life he'd chosen. Princess Lirale was not just an alien princess he'd married for political reasons. She was 3 months after their wedding. David stood in the middle of what the Zephyrians called a harmony circle and tried not to panic. Hundreds of aliens surrounded him, their skin colors shifting in waves of blue and green as they shared emotions. Telepathically, the problem was David couldn't feel what they were feeling, and apparently that was making everyone uncomfortable. Just breathe, Princess Lirale whispered beside him. Remember what I taught you about mental barriers. David closed his eyes and tried to imagine the protective wall around his thoughts that Lirale had described, but it was hard to concentrate when he could sense the growing anxiety of the crowd around him, even without telepathy. He could tell they were getting restless. They were on Zephyria Prime, the alien homeworld. For the first official state visit since their marriage, everything had been going well until they'd visited the sacred grove, a living monument that had been growing for over 1,000 years. The trees were connected in a vast network, sharing nutrients and information in ways that reminded David of the computer system he and Lirale had designed to save the colony ship. But then David had noticed something wrong. The trees in the eastern section were dying, their leaves turning brown and falling despite the perfect growing conditions. His engineer's instincts had kicked in, and before anyone could stop him, he'd started diagnosing the problem. The nutrient flow is blocked. Here, he'd said, pointing to a section where the root system seemed tangled and inefficient. If we just reroute these connections and add some mineral supplements to the soil. The horrified silence that followed told him he made a terrible mistake. David, High Counselor Vex had said, his skin showing deep purple shock, you cannot fix the sacred grove. It has grown this way for centuries according to the will of the life force. But it's dying, David had protested. I can save it. That's when the crowd had gathered. And now David found himself at the center of a diplomatic incident that could destroy the alliance. He married to create. The human does not understand our ways, someone in the crowd called out, their skin flashing angry red. How can he be trusted to represent our interests? He sees only problems to be solved. Another voice added, not the sacred patterns of growth and change. David felt his heart sinking. He'd been trying so hard to fit in, to understand Zephyrian culture, but he kept making mistakes. Everything he did seemed to offend someone. Princess Lirale stepped forward, her skin showing the calm silver that meant she was thinking carefully. My people, she said, her voice carrying across the grove. My husband has spent his life helping worlds grow and flourish. When he sees something dying, his instinct is to heal it. This is not disrespect. This is love. Love. High Counselor Vex's skin showed skeptical green. How is interference with sacred growth love? Because, Lirale continued, humans believe that caring for something means actively working to help it survive and thrive. They do not believe in accepting death when life is possible. David watched the crowd's skin colors shift as they considered her words. He'd never thought of his engineering work as an expression of love before. But maybe Lirale was right. Every time he fixed a broken system or saved a failing colony, he was fighting against entropy and death. But what about the natural order? Someone called out. What about accepting the will of the life force? David surprised himself by speaking up. Maybe the life force sent me here to help. Maybe noticing the problem isn't interference, but part of the natural pattern. The crowd went quiet, their skin colors cycling through various shades of confusion and consideration in human culture. David continued. We believe that intelligence and compassion are part of nature too. When we see suffering, we're supposed to help. When we see problems, we're supposed to solve them. That's what makes us human. An elderly Zephyrian near the front of the crowd stepped forward. Her skin showed deep gold, which David had learned meant wisdom and age. Young human. She said, "What would you do to heal the sacred grove?" David looked at Lyrale, who nodded encouragingly. "I would trace the root network to find where the nutrient flow is blocked. Then I would carefully clear the blockage and supplement the soil with the minerals the trees need. I wouldn't change the basic structure, just help it work better. And if your solution failed, if the trees died anyway, then I would learn from the failure and try a different approach. But I wouldn't give up as long as there was hope." The elderly Zephyrian's skin shifted to bright gold. "This is a different kind of wisdom than ours, but it is still wisdom. Perhaps the life force works through many different forms of understanding." Over the following days, David found himself in dozens of similar situations. He would see a problem, instinctively try to fix it, and accidentally offend someone. But each time, Lyrale would help explain his perspective, and gradually, some of the Zephyrians began to understand. When they visited Earth a month later, the situation reversed. Now it was Lyrale who struggled to understand human customs, while David tried to help her navigate his world's strange social rules. The first disaster happened at a diplomatic reception in New Geneva. David was talking to Ambassador Roberts when he noticed Lyrale surrounded by a group of human diplomats. She was standing very close to them, her hand resting on the arm of a young attaché named Kevin. "Princess," Kevin was saying, his face red with embarrassment. "Perhaps we should step back a bit, but I am trying to understand your emotional state." Lyrale replied, confused, "Physical contact helps me sense your intentions." "Yes, but people are staring," Kevin said, glancing around nervously. David quickly excused himself and hurried over. "Lyrale, remember what I told you about personal space? But how can I properly communicate without sensing emotions?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Different species, different rules," David said gently, guiding her away from the increasingly uncomfortable crowd. "Humans use words and facial expressions more than physical contact. This is very inefficient." Lyrale observed, "Maybe, but it's how we work. You'll get used to it." The second major incident happened during a tour of the terraforming facility, where David used to work. Lyrale was fascinated by the technology, but she kept asking questions that made the human engineers uncomfortable. "How do you ensure the terraformed worlds maintain proper life force balance?" she asked Dr. Peterson, the facility director. "Life force balance?" Dr. Peterson looked confused. "We focus on atmospheric composition, soil chemistry, and ecosystem stability. But what about the spiritual health of the world? The connection between all living things?" Dr. Peterson glanced at David helplessly. "We don't really measure that. You create worlds without considering their spiritual wellness?" Lyrale's skin showed shocked blue. "How do you know the planets will be happy?" "Planets don't have feelings," Dr. Peterson said carefully. "Of course they do. Everything that lives has some form of consciousness. How can you not sense this?" David stepped in before the conversation could get more awkward. "Lyrale, humans experience the world differently than Zephyrians. We don't sense the life force the way you do." "But how do you know if your work is truly helping?" she asked. "We measure success differently. We look at whether people can live healthy, productive lives on the worlds we terraform. If families can build homes and raise children safely, then we know we've succeeded." Lyrale considered this. "So you measure spiritual health through the happiness and prosperity of individuals?" "I guess you could put it that way," David said. "This is a strange but interesting approach," Lyrale said thoughtfully, very focused on the small scale rather than the large patterns. By the end of their tour of both worlds, David and Lyrale had developed their own communication style. When David got to focus on fixing things, Lyrale would remind him to consider the bigger picture and the feelings of others. When Lyrale got overwhelmed by trying to sense everyone's emotions, David would help her focus on direct communication and practical concerns. "I think we make a good team," David said as they sat in their quarters aboard the diplomatic transport, heading back to the space station that had become their home base. Yes, Lyrale agreed, her skin showing warm gold. You help me understand the value of taking action, and I help you understand the importance of considering all perspectives. I built you that meditation garden like you wanted, David said, pointing to a small alcove he converted into a peaceful space with plants from both worlds. Does it help with the overwhelming emotions? Very much. And the privacy barriers you installed help me retreat when human emotions become too intense. She smiled. You solve problems even when the problems are emotional ones. And you've taught me that not every problem needs to be solved immediately. Sometimes it's better to understand the situation fully before acting. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars pass by through the viewport. David realized that somewhere along the way, this strange alien princess had become his closest friend. Maybe that was what love was supposed to be. Not just attraction or romance, but genuine partnership and mutual understanding. David woke up to the sound of alarms blaring throughout the colony ship. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the fever hit him again, and everything came rushing back. He was on New Meridian, the frontier world where he and Princess Lyrale had been overseeing a joint terraforming project for the past 6 months. And he was sick with something the medical scanners couldn't identify. David? Lyrale's voice came from somewhere nearby, filled with worry. The alarms woke you? I am sorry. David tried to sit up, but his head felt like it was full of cotton. What's happening? Is there an emergency? Nothing dangerous. The atmospheric processors are running a routine calibration cycle. Lyrale appeared beside his bed, her skin showing deep blue concern. But you should rest. The fever has not broken yet. For 3 days now, David had been fighting off some kind of virus that his body couldn't seem to shake. The Zephyrian medical team had never seen anything like it, and the human doctors were baffled. It didn't seem life-threatening, but it left him weak, feverish, and unable to think clearly. I should be helping with the calibration, David mumbled, trying again to get out of bed. No, Lyrale said firmly, gently pushing him back down. You should be resting. The other engineers can handle the technical work. David looked at her in surprise. In all their months together, he'd never heard Lyrale speak so decisively about anything involving his work. She'd always been careful to respect his expertise and independence. You're worried about me, he realized. Lyrale's skin shifted to a softer shade of blue. Of course I'm worried. You are my partner. Your well-being matters to me. Something in her voice made David look at her more carefully. Lyrale, are you okay? You look tired. I have been monitoring your condition, she admitted. Zephyrians can sense the life force of others. Remember, your energy patterns have been concerning. You've been staying awake to watch over me? Sleep is less important than ensuring you recover properly. She sat down in the chair beside his bed. Human physiology is still somewhat mysterious to our medical knowledge. I wanted to be certain that any changes in your condition were detected immediately. David felt a warmth that had nothing to do with his fever. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Lyrale's skin showed a steady gold color. David, I need to tell you something. These past months, working together on this project, I have come to care for you in ways I did not expect. David's heart started beating faster, and not because of the illness. What do you mean? I mean that this marriage has become more than a political arrangement for me. You are not just my diplomatic partner anymore. She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. In Zephyrian culture, we have a concept called soul bonding. It is when two minds become so connected that they cannot imagine existence without each other. And you think that's what's happening to us? David asked softly. I know it is what has happened to me, Lyrale said. When I saw you collapse 3 days ago, when I thought I might lose you, I realized that you have become essential to my happiness. David reached out and took her hand. Lyrale, I feel the same way. I've been trying to figure out when it happened. When you stopped being an alien princess I married for political reasons and became the most important person in my life. Her skin brightened to warm gold. You truly feel this way, even though we are so different. especially because we're different. You make me think about things in ways I never would have alone. You've taught me to see the bigger picture, to consider how my actions affect others. And you make me want to be a better person. And you have taught me the value of taking action, of fighting for what matters instead of simply accepting what is. Lyrale leaned closer. You have shown me that love can be built through shared work and mutual respect. David was about to respond when another alarm started sounding. This one with a different tone that made both of them freeze. That's an emergency signal, David said, struggling to sit up despite his weakness. Lyrale was already moving to the communication panel. This is Princess Lyrale. What is the nature of the emergency? Your Highness, came the voice of Commander Torres, the human project leader. We have a serious problem. The ancient ruins we uncovered in Sector 7 are more significant than we thought. Both Earth and Zephyria are claiming exclusive research rights. David felt his stomach drop. How exclusive are we talking? Full excavation rights, unlimited artifact removal, and exclusive publication of any discoveries? Torres' voice was grim. Both governments are sending military escorts to enforce their claims. We could have warships facing off over this site within days. Lyrale's skin went pale silver. This could destroy the alliance and end our marriage. David added quietly, if the two governments went to war over the ruins, there would be no place for a mixed couple caught in the middle. We need to get down there and see what we're dealing with, David said, forcing himself out of bed despite Lyrale's protests. You are still ill, she said. This fever could become worse if you overexert yourself. And this crisis could become a war if we don't handle it properly. David pulled on his work clothes, his hands shaking slightly from weakness. Besides, we work better together. Remember, you'll keep me from making stupid mistakes, and I'll keep you focused on practical solutions. 2 hours later, they stood at the edge of the archaeological site, looking down at ruins that were clearly more advanced than anything either species had built. The structures seemed to blend organic and technological elements in ways that neither human nor Zephyrian architects had ever achieved. No wonder both sides want exclusive rights, David said. This technology could revolutionize everything from space travel to terraforming. But it also raises questions about who was here before us, Lyrale added. These ruins predate both our species' space travel by thousands of years. Dr. Rodriguez, the lead archaeologist, joined them at the site's edge. The really interesting thing is how the ruins seem to respond to different types of interaction. When humans touch the control surfaces, we get one set of responses. When Zephyrians touch them, we get completely different reactions. Different how? Lyrale asked. Watch this. Dr. Rodriguez led them to a crystalline structure that hummed with subtle energy. When she placed her hand on its surface, symbols appeared in the crystal, showing what looked like star charts and mathematical equations. Now you try, she said to Lyrale. When the princess touched the same surface, the symbols changed completely, showing flowing patterns that seemed to represent biological processes and energy flows. It's like the ruins are designed to communicate with different types of intelligence. David realized human logical thinking gets one interface. Zephyrian intuitive thinking gets another. But what if someone with both perspectives tried to use it? Lyrale asked, looking at David meaningfully. David understood immediately. Together. We try together. They placed their hands on the crystal surface simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire structure blazed with light, and new symbols appeared that seemed to combine both sets of information into something far more complex and beautiful. Incredible. Dr. Rodriguez breathed. It's showing us integration patterns that neither interface displayed. Alone, the ruins weren't built for humans or Zephyrians, David said with growing excitement. They were built for cooperation between different types of minds. A species that understood that diversity of thought creates stronger solutions, Lyrale added. Over the next several hours, they explored more of the ruins, always working together to unlock the ancient technology's secrets. Each discovery reinforced the same message the ruins builders had believed. That cooperation between different forms of intelligence was the key to advancement. When the military ships from both governments arrived, David and Lyrale were ready. For them, this site belongs to neither humans nor Zephyrians exclusively. Lyrale announced to the assembled officers from both fleets. It belongs to any species wise enough to work together. The technology only functions when multiple perspectives are combined, David added. Trying to claim it for one side or the other would make it useless. You're asking us to share one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in galactic history? Admiral Chen from the human fleet asked skeptically. We're telling you that you have no choice. David replied, the ruins themselves enforce cooperation. They won't work any other way. It took 2 days of demonstrations and negotiations, but eventually both sides agreed to joint research and shared discoveries. The ruins would be studied by mixed teams of humans and Zephyrians working together. As the crisis passed and the military ships departed, David and Lyrale stood together, watching the sunset over New Meridian. David's fever had finally broken, and he felt stronger than he had in days. We make a good team, Lyrale said, her skin showing contented gold. The best, David agreed. Though I have to ask, when you were taking care of me during the fever, was that just friendship, or was it something more? Lyrale smiled and moved closer to him. David, I have been in love with you for months. I was just waiting for you to recover enough to have this conversation properly. 2 years after their wedding, David stood on the observation deck of Harmony's Heart, the new space station that had become his and Lyrale's home. Watching ships from dozens of different worlds dock at the massive facility, the station was unlike anything that had existed before, built with both human engineering and Zephyrian biotechnology, creating something that felt alive and mechanical at the same time. The morning reports, Lyrale said, joining him at the viewport with a tablet displaying the day's schedule. Her skin showed the calm silver that meant she was in full diplomatic mode, but David could see the hint of gold around her eyes that told him she was happy. How many new applications today? David asked, taking the tablet from her. 17. Species want to join the cultural exchange program, 12 requests for joint research projects, and 34 applications for the Interspecies Partnership Initiative. Lyrale smiled. Remember when we thought our marriage was unusual? Now, we have over 100 mixed couples working throughout the alliance. David scrolled through the reports, still amazed by how much had changed. What had started as a desperate diplomatic solution had somehow become the foundation for the largest peaceful alliance in galactic history. The exchange programs they'd helped design allowed young people from different species to live and study together. The research projects combined the best thinking from dozens of worlds, and the partnership initiative helped other interspecies couples navigate the challenges that David and Lyrale had faced. Speaking of partnerships, David said, we have that meeting with the Crystalline Confederation at 10. They're still nervous about joining a biological-based alliance. Understandable. Lyrale replied, silicon-based life forms have very different needs than carbon-based species, but I think our new flexible habitat designs will address their concerns. David was about to respond when an urgent chime sounded from the station's communication system. David, Lyrale, please report to the security center immediately. Came the voice of Captain Martinez, the station's head of security. They found Captain Martinez standing in front of a wall of monitors showing various parts of the station. Her expression was grim. We have a problem. Someone has been sabotaging the Alliance projects. What kind of sabotage? Lyrale asked, her skin shifting to concerned blue. Subtle stuff. Computer viruses that corrupt translation programs, chemical agents that make shared habitats uncomfortable for certain species. Propaganda messages designed to increase tension between different groups. Martinez pointed to one of the monitors. But this morning, we caught them in the act. The screen showed security footage of figures in environmental suits, planting some kind of device in the war recycling center. If that device had activated, it would have made the water supply toxic to Zephyrians while remaining harmless to humans. Martinez explained. David felt anger rising in his chest. Someone's trying to turn the species against each other. More than that, Martinez continued. We've traced the sabotage back to a group calling themselves the Purity Alliance. They believe that mixing species weakens everyone involved. They have supporters on both sides, Lyrale said quietly, studying the security footage. I recognize some of those movement patterns, Zephyrian military training, and the technical knowledge they're showing suggests human engineering expertise. David added, this isn't just random terrorism, it's organized opposition to everything we've built. Over the next few hours, they worked with Martinez and her team to uncover the full scope of the sabotage network. The Purity Alliance had members from multiple species, all united by the belief that interspecies cooperation was dangerous and unnatural. They're planning something big, Martinez said, showing them intercepted communications. Some kind of demonstration that will prove their point about the dangers of mixing species. When David asked, today, during the Crystalline Confederation's rival ceremony, with all the media attention and diplomatic representatives, it would be the perfect opportunity to cause maximum embarrassment. David and Lyrale exchanged a look. They'd faced crises before, but this felt different. This wasn't a technical problem they could solve together or a cultural misunderstanding they could bridge. This was an attack on the very idea that different species could work together. What's their target? Lyrale asked. The new habitat prototype. Martinez replied. The one designed to accommodate both biological and silicon-based life forms. If they can make it fail spectacularly during the demonstration, they'll prove that interspecies cooperation is impossible. David studied the technical specifications of the planned attack. They're going to overload the environmental controls, making the habitat uninhabitable for everyone. It'll look like our technology failed, but really it's deliberate sabotage. Can you stop it? Martinez asked. Maybe, David said, but I'll need to get into the habitat's control center during the ceremony. That means working while hundreds of diplomats are watching. I will help. Lyrale said immediately, if we work together, we can counter their sabotage while making it look like a normal system adjustment. It's risky, Martinez warned. If you fail, or if the saboteurs have backup plans, you could be hurt. And if we don't try, the alliance could collapse, David replied. People will lose faith in interspecies cooperation, and everything we've built will fall apart. 3 hours later, the ceremony began in the station's main assembly hall. Representatives from the Crystalline Confederation floated in specially designed mobility pods, their silicon-based bodies glittering like living gems in the station's lights. Diplomats from dozens of other species filled the viewing galleries, all watching as David and Lyrale prepared to demonstrate the new habitat technology. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, Lyrale announced to the assembled crowd, today, we present a new achievement in cooperative engineering, a habitat that can simultaneously support carbon-based biological life and silicon-based crystalline consciousness. David activated the habitat systems, watching the environmental displays show perfect conditions for both types of life. But on his hidden diagnostic screen, he could see the sabotage program starting to run, slowly corrupting the environmental controls. The habitat uses bioneural networks to monitor and adjust conditions in real time, David explained to the audience while secretly starting his countermeasures. It learns from the needs of its inhabitants and adapts accordingly. Behind the scenes, David and Lyrale worked frantically to stop the sabotage. Every time the virus tried to corrupt the system, they were routed around it. When it attempted to overload the power grid, they shifted energy flows through backup circuits. And when it tried to flood the habitat with toxic gases, they isolated the contaminated sections and activated emergency scrubbers. As you can see, Lyrale said, her skin showing calm gold even though David knew she was working as hard as he was. The habitat maintains perfect conditions for both biological and crystalline life forms. The demonstration was going perfectly from the audience's perspective, but David could see that the sabotage program was adapting, learning from their countermeasures and developing new attacks. David, Lyrale whispered, the program is evolving faster than we can stop it. Then we don't stop it, David realized. We use it instead of fighting the sabotage program. David began redirecting its energy. Every time it tried to corrupt the system, he channeled that energy into improving the habitat's performance. When it attempted to create chaos, he used that chaos to demonstrate the habitat's ability to adapt to unexpected changes. The habitat is now responding to a complex stress test. David announced to the audience as the sabotage program unknowingly helped him showcase the technology's resilience. As you can see, it automatically adjusts to maintain optimal conditions even under extreme circumstances. The Crystalline Confederation representatives were clearly impressed. Their translucent bodies pulsed with patterns that David had learned, meant approval and interest. But then the real attack came. The sabotage program activated a physical device that began pumping corrosive chemicals into the habitat's atmosphere. This wasn't something David could redirect or reprogram. The habitat was actually being poisoned. Lyrale, David said urgently. We need to evacuate the test subjects. Wait, she said, studying the readouts. Look at what the habitat is doing. David watched in amazement as the bio-neural networks began adapting to the chemical attack. The living components of the habitat's systems started breaking down the toxic compounds, while the mechanical systems filtered and neutralized the remaining contamination. It's working. David breathed. The habitat is actually healing itself because it was designed by both our species working together, Lyrale said with wonder. Human engineering gave it the ability to adapt mechanically, and Zephyrian biotechnology gave it the ability to heal organically. The demonstration concluded with the habitat not only surviving the sabotage but actually improving its performance. As a result, the audience erupted in applause, and the Crystalline Confederation immediately signed the alliance agreement later, as they stood in their private garden on the station, tending to plants from both their worlds that had learned to grow together. David reflected on everything they'd accomplished.